devices. We have a diagnostic device that you are going to find in clinics, which we call HRP, or high resolution perimetry. And the purpose of this device is really to map the visual field of this patient, to understand and characterize the location of their blind field, where the intact visual field is located, and to precisely identify what we call the location of what we call the transition zone between intact vision and blind field. Then we have a therapy device, and the purpose of the therapy device is to visually stimulate the transition zone while depriving the intact field from any visual stimuli. And the purpose of this therapy is to induce what we call neuroplasticity in the visual cortex or in the optic nerves. And the purpose of the neuroplasticity, which is a fairly slow recovery process, is basically what we are going to observe is a slow shrinkage of the blind field. This type of therapy places a high demand on the patient. The process is slow, and typically a patient will be asked to follow this therapy roughly 45 minutes to an hour a day, 6 days a week, for 6 months. And if the results are positive, this therapy may continue for 9 months, possibly a year. So only a home-type device was practical, because of this need, to follow this therapy every day. The device we use for therapy purposes is completely non-invasive. So we basically present, it's a computer with a display for which we precisely control the luminance and contrast ratio and the different characteristics. The patient uses a chin rest, so we precisely position the patient with respect to the display, and we are asked to fixate. So basically we have to look at this target consistently throughout the therapy, the 20 minutes or 30 minutes that the therapy may last, and we present stimuli right on top of their transition zone. And we have different techniques, but basically we sweep from the intact field into the blind field repeatedly and somewhat randomly. And in the background, we also continuously, during a therapy session, continue to map the rest of the visual field. So we continue to test them from time to time on the blind field, intact field. So it's both a combination of therapy by stimulating the transition zone and background diagnostic by stimulating the rest of the visual field. And we collect all this data. Our typical patient will have lost this type of visual field, but they will need to have sufficient cognitive and motor function so that they are capable to use our device. They also need to have a certain amount of visual acuity so that they can see. What we do is not intended for people which are completely blind, okay? You need to have this partial loss of vision. The VRT has been effective with 65 to 67% of the patients we have treated in the past. We currently conduct research with Bascom Palmer in Miami, Harvard Medical School, and Columbia Medical School. We continue to find different ways and methods to improve the effectiveness of the therapy process. This brings me pretty much to our practical implementation of this therapy. NovaVision received the first FDA approval in 2003. The first generation therapy device did not really involve IT in any way. We would receive a visual field map for a patient. Our clinician would develop, specific for this patient, a what we called a therapy area, and we would send this customized device to the patient. From then on, they would be treated, right on their transition zone, and once a month, they would send us a memory card which would contain their result. We would look at that. We would send them, a new memory card containing the therapy for the next month. And it would be a cumbersome process, really using hardware to move data. And the new therapy had this 1 month lag with respect to any progress or result, obtained by the patient. The second generation, we started using what we call automatic data transfer, which was a glorious term really to describe the fact that now our device would be connected by the patient to their phone once a week, a couple of times a month maybe, and then they would transfer to us over the phone their data and results for the past week, past 2 weeks, and we would analyze that, and we would use the phone also to update their therapy. Now, in the latest generation of what we do, we use basically constant connectivity using the internet to have a permanent connection during the therapy between their device and our servers. Our software, the software running on our servers, is completely adaptive. We track the progress of the patient day after day. We train the patient. We evaluate constantly where their visual field is shrinking, and we adapt our therapy area and the therapy parameters accordingly. Another aspect of that, so remember, we are now adaptive. We see essentially in real time what the patient is doing, so that allows us also to improve the compliance of our patient. Now we know about a patient skipping a particular therapy session, a day, 2 days, 3 days, and really compliance is very important for this form of therapy, so we can contact their primary care physician, or we can contact the patient. Another aspect is that all the data which is collected during any therapy session is collected on our server, okay? And that means that we can go back and mine this data, because really we're still looking for ways to improve. We continuously work at improving our algorithm. So as we see a particular type of vision loss and we observe a particular outcome, we can go back and look at what were the therapy settings for this patient that gave us maybe a 10% shrinkage in the blind field. And we look for statistically significant data as we do this mining, so that we can go back, refine our algorithm, update the software, and basically once we deploy that on our servers, every patient can benefit from that. And that's basically the type of approach we are taking with our IT. And another angle of this data mining, is that even today, we don't have a good predictor of successful outcome. We cannot project if a patient will improve based on their age, on the age of the lesion, on the location of the lesion, the type of vision loss. We don't really know. Last year, we treated a patient who lost part of his visual field during World War II. He was in his 80s, and he responded very well. He had had a very stable vision loss for almost 50 years. And other people who have lost their vision a year ago don't respond as well. But this is not consistent. So once again, we can use this data mining to optimize and try to look at some correlation and some trend and some indicators that what could give us a successful outcome prediction for patients, so that we will be able to better sort our potential patients on the front end and be more selective in the process. That's pretty much. Any question at this point?